The Bermuda Triangle has been the subject of speculation for more than a century. Ships disappear without distress calls. Aircraft vanish from radar. Entire crews are lost without explanation. Most people assume the stories are exaggerations, myths that grew larger with every retelling. In the summer of 2026, a privately funded expedition set out to investigate a series of satellite anomalies that had been detected deep within the triangle. Every few weeks, a landmass appeared on satellite imagery where no island should have existed. The object would remain visible for several hours, sometimes an entire day, before disappearing completely. Government agencies dismissed the images as equipment malfunctions. The research team behind the expedition disagreed. Their vessel, the Artemis, carried 8 people: scientists, biologists, a geologist, and 2 security contractors. Their goal was simple: reach the coordinates, document whatever was causing the anomaly, and return home. The journey was uneventful until the 4th night. Navigation systems began behaving erratically. GPS coordinates shifted by miles without warning. Backup systems produced different readings than the primary equipment. By dawn, every electronic compass on board pointed in a different direction. Then, the fog appeared. Witness accounts from the expedition would later describe it as unlike any natural weather phenomenon they had ever seen. It wasn't moving across the ocean. It seemed stationary, as if it had been waiting for them. The Artemis entered the fog shortly after sunrise. For nearly 6 hours, visibility dropped to less than 20 feet. No one spoke much during that time. The atmosphere aboard the vessel changed. Crew members reported feeling watched. Several described hearing distant sounds beyond the fog, though no one could agree on what they had heard. At 2:14 p.m., the fog suddenly vanished. The island was directly ahead. No one had expected it to be so large. Towering cliffs rose from the ocean. Dense jungle covered nearly every visible surface. Waterfalls cascaded from elevated plateaus hidden among the clouds. It looked less like an island and more like a forgotten continent. The excitement on board was immediate. Cameras were deployed, drones were launched, samples were collected from the shoreline within minutes of arrival. At first, everything seemed normal. Then, the discoveries began. Plants, believed extinct for millions of years, grew in enormous clusters throughout the jungle. Ferns reached heights of 30 feet. Trees resembled species known only through fossil records. The scientists couldn't believe what they were seeing. The deeper they traveled inland, the stranger the island became. Animals appeared that shouldn't have existed. The first was a herd of creatures resembling giant ground sloths moving slowly through a valley. Later, they observed massive, flightless birds that matched no known species. Every discovery challenged everything modern science believed about extinction. The expedition should have left immediately. Instead, they became obsessed. The island represented the greatest biological discovery in human history. No one wanted to be the person responsible for abandoning it. By the 2nd day, they had established a semi-permanent camp several miles inland. That decision would cost most of them their lives. The first warning came during the 3rd night. One of the security contractors noticed lights deep within the jungle. At first, he assumed they belonged to another expedition, but there was a problem. The lights were arranged in a perfect line, dozens of them, and they weren't moving. When the team investigated the following morning, they discovered a clearing containing rows of wooden stakes. Human bones hung from each one. Some appeared centuries old. Others looked disturbingly recent. Among the remains they found rusted equipment, fragments of radios and pieces of aircraft wreckage. The island had been found before, many times. No one had ever escaped. The discovery shattered morale. Several crew members demanded they return to the Artemis immediately. Others argued they needed more evidence before leaving. The debate ended when Dr. Mason Reed noticed something carved into one of the weathered stakes. Coordinates. Modern coordinates. Coordinates matching the island itself. Below them were 4 words. Do not stay after dark. That evening, the sounds began. Not roars, not animal calls. Voices. Human voices, echoing from deep within the jungle. Voices calling names. Voices speaking languages the crew didn't recognize. Voices that seemed to know exactly where they were. And when night finally fell, something started moving beyond the tree line surrounding camp. Something very large. None of the crew slept that night. The movement around camp continued until sunrise. Whatever had been circling them remained hidden behind the dense vegetation, never fully revealing itself. Several times, flashlights illuminated enormous silhouettes between the trees, but the shapes vanished before anyone could identify them. At dawn, 3 crew members were missing. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks, only empty tents. Panic spread quickly. The expedition was over. Everyone agreed they needed to return to the shoreline immediately. The journey back should have taken less than a day. Instead, it took 3. The island seemed to change around them. Landmarks disappeared. Valleys appeared where none had existed before. GPS devices continued malfunctioning, leading them in circles. More than once, the group found themselves standing in locations they had already passed hours earlier. The island didn't want them to leave. By the second day, only 5 people remained. Several vanished during the night. One disappeared while walking less than 20 feet from the group. The survivors never heard him scream. The remaining crew became convinced they were being hunted, but not by the prehistoric animals they had documented. Those creatures fled whenever the unseen presence approached. Even the island's apex predators feared it. Late on the 3rd day, the survivors finally reached the coast. What they found destroyed the last of their hope. The Artemis was gone. Only twisted debris remained floating offshore. Something had crushed the vessel. Steel beams had been folded like paper. No storm could have caused that level of damage. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then, Sarah Keller spotted an emergency life raft drifting among the wreckage. It was damaged, but usable. Their only chance. At sunset, 3 survivors pushed the raft into the water and began paddling away from the island. Dr. Mason Reed, Sarah Keller, and security contractor Ryan Holt. The island gradually disappeared behind them as darkness covered the ocean. For the first time in days, it felt like they might survive. Then, Ryan looked into the water. He never had time to react. Something enormous erupted from beneath the surface. The raft lurched violently. Ryan vanished. The others saw only a massive shape disappearing into the darkness below. No blood surfaced, no body, just silence. Mason and Sarah continued paddling through the night. Hour after hour passed. The island was gone. The stars returned. The ocean became calm. By dawn, they could see a distant cargo ship on the horizon. Relief overwhelmed them. They had made it. After everything they had endured, they were finally going home. Sarah actually laughed. It was the first genuine smile either of them had shown since arriving at the island. The cargo ship grew closer. Rescue was minutes away. Then Sarah noticed movement beneath the raft. A shadow, massive, keeping pace with them. At first, Mason thought exhaustion was affecting her judgment. Then he saw it too. The shape was longer than the raft, longer than the Artemis had been. Something ancient was following them through the water. The ocean exploded. A colossal reptilian head burst from below, jaws opening around the side of the raft. Mason was thrown clear into the water. When he surfaced, Sarah was screaming. The creature dragged her beneath the waves before disappearing into the depths. The entire attack lasted less than 5 seconds. Then the ocean became calm again, as if nothing had happened. Hours later, Mason was rescued by the cargo ship. He was the only survivor. Authorities searched the area for weeks. No island was found. No wreckage was recovered beyond a few scattered fragments. Mason's testimony was officially dismissed as trauma-induced delusion. The case was closed. But 3 weeks after his rescue, while recovering in a hospital, Mason woke shortly before sunrise. Something outside his room had awakened him. A sound. Slow. Heavy. Like wet footsteps. He looked through the glass window in his door. The hallway was empty, at least it appeared empty. Then he noticed the floor. A trail of muddy footprints stretched down the corridor. Each print contained 3 enormous clawed toes, the same pattern documented on the island. Security footage from that night was later reviewed. The cameras captured the footprints appearing one by one, as if something invisible had walked through the hallway. The final print stopped directly outside Mason's door, facing inward, waiting. The footage cuts out 13 seconds later. No explanation was ever found, and Mason disappeared from the hospital the following night. He was never seen again. This tape was never meant to be found, but now that you've seen it, you're part of it. If anything feels off, don't ignore it. And whatever you do, don't rewind. Subscribe for the next transmission.